So welcome everybody. Thanks for coming to the Watershed Alliance remote breakfast. Hope you brought your cup of coffee and maybe have delayed your breakfast. And this is an experiment to use this format. The Watershed Alliance, as many of you know, has been enjoying a breakfast meeting series we've figured out recently since 2007. So we've been at this for 13 years with second Thursdays at the Plaza Diner in New Paltz for many years. And every month we have a speaker who brings what I like to say is a semi-geeky topic. It's more than lightweight. It's really an educational and informative, and the vector or the common theme is always water. So it can be economics, it can be biology, it can be ecological, it can be hydrogeology. I'm a hydrogeologist, I think we've enjoyed using it as an opportunity to share technical content with each other in a very approachable way, with the idea being to make it useful. You know, how do we in our respective watersheds take this kind of information and be better educated and be more tailored and focused on issues in a precise and careful way. I'm Russell Urban Mead, if I haven't introduced myself. I'm a hydrogeologist. I work in Poughkeepsie. I live in Hyde Park. And for many years, I was on the board of the Hudson River Watershed Alliance. I was involved before it was even an official board and an official organization. I've just left the board after my terms of service, but I'm continuing to enjoy organizing and being a portion of the organizing team for these environmental breakfasts. If we were in New Paltz, for those of you who've been in New Paltz, we would typically have 30 or 40 people gathered for breakfast, and we'd run around the circle and introduce ourselves, because part of the mission of the Watershed Alliance is network building, so that when issues arise, people know each other, they can call each other, the network is strong. That's a little more difficult to do this morning, so we're not going to do the run around the circle with the introductions, and Emily and I need to figure out a way to sort of replicate that benefit. Historically, we haven't shared the attendee list, but allowed people to self-select and greet each other after meetings based on having heard each other introduce themselves. So those are some of the logistical pieces. We have good speakers lined up for the rest of this year. Our typical cycle is the academic year, kind of October to June for a speaker cycle, and then taking off the summer because people's schedules get more complicated. In the COVID era, who knows what we'll do, but this has been a wonderful part of the Watershed Alliance mission for many, many years. So moving on to our speaker for today, our usual format is that the speaker has the time from about now until about 9:35 or 9:25, and then we always close right at 9:30 sharp. Because for people who do need to go on to their jobs, it's nice to know that these things end on time. So Emily Vail is our speaker today. Emily is known to many of you. She started, at least my experience with Emily Vail dates to when she was working for the Estuary Program here in Region 3. DEC offices. She became the Hudson River Watershed Alliance's executive director in 2019. She has a master's of science degree in the natural resources sector at Cornell University. And she's been on the schedule now to give a presentation about the Watershed Alliance for a couple months. Last month she was our speaker, and we just needed to cancel because COVID was just crashing in on us. So we're absolutely delighted to have Emily here today to give an update on the mission and the focus of the Watershed Alliance at a point when, as an incorporated organization, we're celebrating our 10th year. So with that, I'm going to turn the time over to Emily. And Emily, thank you very much for being here today.
Thank you so much, Russell, for doing this and being flexible with our web-based format this month. And thank you all for joining us. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and get started here. Okay, so you should all see, I can't see your chat anymore, but you should all see my face in the upper right-hand corner and hopefully my slide as well. Russell, look good?
Yes.
Okay, great. So welcome everyone to our breakfast lecture this morning. My name is Emily Vail. I'm the Executive Director of the Hudson River Watershed Alliance. We already did sort of a Zoom introduction, but just to recap, please feel free to type your questions into the Q&A box anytime. You can find that in the bottom menu. There's a little icon. You will be on mute during the presentation and we won't have videos turned on for you. But after the presentation, if you have a question you'd like to ask out loud, instead of in the chat box, please raise your hand through the participants panel, which is also a little icon on the bottom menu. I'll call on you and unmute you to ask that question. I'm hoping to have plenty of time at the end for questions. So, okay. I wanted to apologize in advance for two things that might happen over the next hour. That's my apartment building, and then you can see right across the street is the industrial freight train, which is very loud here in Kingston. It's likely to come at some point in the next hour. Freight is still going strong. And then you might also see next to that is a picture of my cat Tipatina. She loves watersheds very much and also really likes to help. So hopeful that she'll leave this to me, but she might also join us at some point, so just to warn you. Okay, great. So a brief outline of what I'll be talking about today. I'll talk about who we are at the Hudson River Watershed Alliance, what we do, focusing on supporting local watershed groups, improving intermunicipal coordination, and communicating as a collective voice. We'll talk about what's next, and then ways to get involved. So when we're talking about the Hudson River Watershed, we're talking about the 13,000 square mile land area that is a part of the Hudson River Watershed. So again, a watershed is the land area that drains to a particular body of water. This map shows in yellow the upper Hudson watershed, in blue, the Mohawk River watershed, and in purple, the Hudson River Estuary watershed. So any rain or precipitation that falls in that colored area will eventually make its way to the Hudson River, and so it's all considered part of our watershed and our program area. And the tributaries that convey that water, that bring that rain and precipitation to the Hudson River, support the health and ecosystem of the whole Hudson River system. So we have about 32 watershed groups that are focused on tributaries to the Hudson River. Those groups have a variety of forms, and they also are working on all kinds of different things like water quality, flooding, stream habitat, drinking water, resiliency, education, community engagement, and more. So we have a diverse set of groups with a diverse set of different areas of activity as well. So the Hudson River Watershed Alliance began in 2005 as a project of the Hudson River Sloop Clearwater and incorporated in 2010 as its own nonprofit. So we're celebrating our 10th year this year as an incorporated organization. Our mission is to unite and empower communities to protect their local water resources. We work across the Hudson River Watershed to do that, and we have a very active board of volunteers and a staff of one, and that's me. So there I am in a slightly different outfit than you find me today. So I started as executive director of the Hudson River Watershed Alliance just about a year ago. And prior to that, I spent 8 years at the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation's Hudson River Estuary Program. I actually had some experience coordinating a small watershed group. I ran the Casper Hill Watershed Alliance in Poughkeepsie for about 2 years. And I got my start in all of this watershed work as a citizen scientist doing volunteer water quality monitoring when I was in high school. So I've been doing the thing that you see me doing in that picture for a while, sampling some water quality. So at this point, I just want to check in and make sure everyone can see me and tech is working, and so far so good. Didn't want to, yeah, it's working. Yes, okay, great, thank you, perfect. Okay, so let's jump right in. So the Hudson River Watershed Alliance works to support local watershed groups, and we do that through a variety of different programs and tools. The first one I'd like to focus on are watershed roundtables. These are based on peer-to-peer information sharing, where we invite 1 to 2 representatives from each watershed group from all across the region to come together and learn from each other. And we offer this program in partnership with the Hudson River Estuary Program. Each watershed roundtable includes updates from groups on what they're working on or what their problems are, a feature presentation on a particular topic, and we always have time for conversations and networking to make sure that the groups are connected and sharing things that are working or working together to solve problems. We also have been including an optional field trip as part of that. And in this picture, our last watershed roundtable that took place in November, we went to the Bard Water Lab to learn more about how Bard University is helping out with some of the citizen science and the Sawkill watershed community efforts. Okay, we also offer workshops and trainings to share more technical information, help people build new skills, and dive a little bit more deeply into one particular topic. We offer these in partnership with the Hudson River Estuary Program as well. This photo is from our barrier workshop that was held last summer on dams and culverts and their impact on aquatic habitat and flooding. Last year, we also had a workshop on water quality monitoring that was really wonderful. And presentations from both of those workshops are up on the website. They have a lot of really practical information. So if you're interested in either of those topics, I recommend you take a look at our website and see some of the information that's posted there. We were planning to have a workshop on stream and buffer protection last week at SUNY New Paltz, which has now been postponed, but we've posted some relevant resources on stream and buffer protection up on the website. So again, if you're interested in that topic, take a look up there. Our annual conference is the biggest event of the year. We provide case studies, best practices, new ideas, and again, plenty of time for networking. This year, the annual conference is scheduled for October 27th, 2020 at the Franklin D. Roosevelt Historic Site and Library. And that conference would not be possible without the support of many sponsors and many partners who help us put that together. We also offer 2 different lecture series. Of course, we have the Omelet, the Watershed breakfast series at the Plaza Diner in New Paltz every 2nd Thursday, which you're at right now, and some of you may notice some familiar faces in this picture. This was from our December breakfast lecture with Stuart Finley from the Carey Institute. And these have been going on for the past 13 years, not 12 years. And I just wanted to say thank you so much to Russell for putting these programs together. It's such a valuable opportunity for us to get together and learn. And we just so appreciate Russell's work to put these together. We also have a lecture series for the Upper Hudson, which is at Brown's Brewing Company in Troy. And we've had to postpone the event that was planned there as well. But we will be presenting lectures as webinars until we can meet again in person. And we're still working out how best to accomplish some of the networking, some of the community building that we know is so important to these. So stay tuned on that. We also support local watershed groups by offering technical assistance to watershed groups. And here are some of the things that I've been working on in the past couple months. Helping the Wappinger Creek Watershed Intermunicipal Council with their 9-element watershed plan. I've been on the steering committee and providing review for their watershed plan. I helped with the Ulster County Watershed Roundtable, the Ulster County Water Quality Coordinating Committee, and the watershed groups in Ulster County put that together, helping them to scope out their agenda and facilitate some of the discussions. I recently gave a presentation at the Rondout Creek Watershed Alliance meeting on strategic planning and some of the work that the Alliance is doing that can help watershed groups. And right now I'm working with the Wallkill River Watershed Alliance to scope out the Wallkill River Summit. I'll be a presenter at the summit, and since we can't have it in person this spring, we're looking to move that to an online format as well. So just a couple of examples of things that I'm doing this spring to help out our watershed groups. The Hudson River Watershed Alliance also works with municipalities to improve intermunicipal coordination around water issues. And we know that water doesn't necessarily follow municipal boundaries. And so bringing communities together to talk about some of their shared resources or shared challenges can be a really great opportunity. So one of the programs that we've been working with the Nature Conservancy on are community resilience building workshops. These are workshops that bring several municipalities together. There's a train. It's bound to happen at some point. It's just going to get louder. But I'll continue. There's a lot of road crossings here in Kingston, and it has to honk its horn at every road crossing. So the community resilience building workshops brings together municipalities that share water resources and take them through a facilitated discussion to identify assets that are either strengths or vulnerabilities to climate change with a focus on flooding. So, and other climate hazards also include heat and drought and again, inland and coastal flooding looking at the Hudson River. So we bring these municipalities together, taking them through the facilitated discussion, and then produce a report that summarizes some of the key actions that they've identified through this process. We've completed this process in 30 municipalities in 5 different counties so far, and looking forward to working with the Hudson 7 Intermunicipal Council, which is focused on the Hudson River as a drinking water source in 2020 and 2021. I've also been attending regional climate resilience meetings to represent watershed issues and watershed groups, and those include the Hudson River Flood Resilience Network that Scenic Hudson coordinates, and the Hudson River Estuary Program's Waterfront Resilience Coordination Partners. So making sure that our watershed work and our resilience work is really connected and making sure the groups are getting what they need. We've also partnered with Pace University on their Land Use Leadership Alliance, their LULA training. This is an award-winning 3-day training that the Pace Land Use Law Center offers specifically to train local leaders on the land use process. And last year we partnered with them to work in Albany County and brought together local leaders from municipalities in Albany County. And the Hudson River Watershed Alliance did a 4th day that was specifically focused on water issues that were of concern for those communities. So this has been a really wonderful partnership. So in 2020, we're looking forward to bringing that to the Rojan, Sawkill, and Upper Wappinger Creek watersheds. Hopefully this summer, but we'll see what happens with gatherings. Okay. We also work to improve intermunicipal coordination through our work with watershed groups and making sure that municipalities and community-based volunteer groups are connected and coordinating and working together to achieve some of these goals. Okay. The Hudson River Watershed Alliance also works to communicate as a collective voice on watershed issues and work throughout the region. Last year, we put together a watershed yearbook. We asked each watershed group to send us a fact, an accomplishment, an opportunity, and a challenge. And we compiled that with a map and a photo, and that's available as a PDF up on our website. You can go to that link for the HRWA yearbook. This is an example of the Wallkill Rivers sheet, but we've gotten about 30 of those. In 2020, we're expanding the Watershed Yearbook to be a full Work on Watersheds report and compiling information from all of our watershed partners, stories, media, metrics from across the watershed, and hoping to provide a printed report so we can share these stories more broadly. This is a photo of the Sawkill watershed community that they sent me as part of the Watershed Yearbook last year. We have a couple other communication tools that we use. We have our monthly Watershed Digest email newsletter, which has an article on a timely topic, updates from the Hudson River Watershed Alliance on our work, and opportunities and resources. We include job postings there, so if you have any job postings or grants or other opportunities, please send those to me so we can include them. We also have our website and social media. Our handle is at Hudson River Watershed Alliance on Facebook and Instagram if you're into that sort of thing. So in 2019, we held 22 educational programs for 742 people across 6 counties in the Hudson River watershed. We assisted 25 watershed groups and helped 18 municipalities with climate resilience and land use planning through our partnerships with the Nature Conservancy and Pace University. So what's next? We find ourselves in an unusual time here with COVID-19 and gatherings that are limited or not able to happen. So what are we doing? So for the past year, and really I think since 2005, the Hudson River Watershed Alliance has been working to continue to build capacity. In 2018, we had, and this was before I came on board, we had 2 strategic plans that were completed, a communications plan, which I'm working to implement in collaboration with our communications committee, and a fundraising plan, which I'm working to implement in collaboration with our development committee. So we have some good strategic frameworks that we're using specifically around communications and fundraising to continue to build our capacity and grow as an organization. In June, we will have our Toast to the Tribs Awards benefit. We're not sure exactly what that's going to look like, but we're planning to move to an online type format at this point. We are dedicated to recognizing our watershed wave makers. This is an awards program, and we're looking for nominations by April 15th. So if you know of an award-worthy individual, watershed group, business, organization, or institution, please nominate them as a wave maker. There's information posted on our website, hudsonwatershed.org/toasttothetribs, with more details on how to submit names for nominees. But we're really looking to celebrate great work, particularly great volunteer work in the region. So more information to come on our Toast to the Tribs format and timing and what that will all look like, but stay tuned. In terms of our COVID-19 response, we've moved programs online. As you know, you're here with us in an online format. There are certain programs that we've postponed at this point, particularly the Stream and Buffer workshop that was planned for SUNY New Paltz, but we've posted resources on the website, including this wetland and watercourse protection measures list of local laws that was developed by the Department of State as part of the Community Risk and Resiliency Act. So if you're interested in those types of issues, recommend that you go on our website and take a look at some of the resources that have been posted. And the Hudson River Watershed Alliance board and committee meetings have all moved to video conference to make sure that we are doing our part to flatten the curve and social distance, but still getting our work done. So I'm continuing to support watershed groups at this time. I'm doing a lot of Zoom meetings for watershed groups and making sure they have the technical tools they need to continue their important work. Also providing technical assistance on planning and shifting programs, along with all the normal technical assistance that I do. I recently completed a couple of community resilience building reports. So this time has been really helpful for sitting down and writing these reports. And we're also working to communicate innovative ways to adapt. So in our latest Watershed Digest newsletter, there was an article about virtual field trips and opportunities to teach about watersheds, even when you can't physically take a class of students outside together. I'm also working to collect photos of responsible social distancing along water bodies. I've compiled all of these into a Flickr account, been posting them on social media. And I just got a note that said my internet connection was unstable, but can you still hear me? Yep, okay, great, you can still hear me. Okay, great. Right, social distancing along water bodies, photographs. So if you have photographs, please send them to me. I would love to include them. It's been so wonderful to see people getting fresh air and taking some time to enjoy our water resources across the region. It's also been fun to see the signs of spring, like amphibians and trees leafing out and all kinds of other things. So I think that this time really underscores the importance of access to clean water and open space for drinking water and for our own individual health, for mental health, and also for watershed health. Another, okay, great. I have windows popping up on my computer. Another big project that we're working on this spring is our needs assessment. This project is to understand the needs of our local partners, to target programs and technical assistance to make sure we're having the greatest impact and helping our local partners. We have funding for this from the Hudson River Estuary Program through a grant. And working in collaboration with Dr. Michael Finewood, who's a member of the Alliance's board, we've completed 32 interviews with 28 watershed groups over the winter. We're working to transcribe those interviews and do a content analysis in partnership with Michael's class of Pace University students. So they're learning research methods and helping us out with this project, which is incredible. So we'll do this content analysis to understand themes across all of the different groups across the whole region, and planning to do some follow-up with focus groups to understand more about what some of these major themes might mean and what we might be able to do about it. This photograph is actually from the Ulster County Watershed Roundtable, but it's sort of what I imagined our focus groups might look like, right? Small groups of tables with people talking about different subjects. We know that we might not be able to get together for a while, so we're working on figuring out how we can still get that focus group knowledge into this report. So once we compile all this information, we'll be writing a report on our watershed needs to share our findings. And there are a couple other outputs that are involved with this project. We'll be working on a guide for new watershed groups with recommendations and best practices and resources. We'll be sharing success stories based on some of the information that we learn. There's also an opportunity to have a communications training. We heard from a lot of groups that communications in various forms is a real need in understanding how to better communicate. And then we'll also be sharing the findings at our 2020 annual Watershed Conference. So the theme of that conference will be the findings from our needs assessment. The needs assessment is a really exciting opportunity because it will really provide a foundation for the strategic direction of the Hudson River Watershed Alliance going forward. We've had an incredible opportunity to hear from many of our watershed group partners who have voiced a number of things that are going really well, concerns that they have, challenges, barriers, and I'm really excited to be working on this project, particularly at this time, because it's a real opportunity to reevaluate what's working well and where there might be some opportunities for improvement as well. So how can you get involved? You can attend our education and capacity building programs remotely as they might be this spring, and hopefully in person as soon as we can. Please stay in touch. Please share your work and your stories, what's going on locally. Please nominate a watershed wave maker by April 15th if you know of individuals or groups that are deserving. And share your socially distant water body photos. So that link, if anyone is interested in getting the copy of the PowerPoint afterwards, goes right to our Flickr page where I've compiled an album of all the pictures that I've collected so far. And that's it. That went so fast. Hopefully I didn't speak too fast. So that's my contact information. Thank you so much for joining us. And I think now I'll open it up for questions. I wanted to make sure that there was plenty of time for me to hear from you and answer any questions you might have for me. So I'm gonna stop the share. Okay. Great. Now I can finally see the chat again. Oh. And Russell's muted, and I don't know. Oh, you're back. Okay, great.
Thank you. Emily, that was wonderful. I don't know whether we want to suggest that people put up their hands for questions or just put them in the chat and then Emily, you respond to them.
Sure.
Why don't we do that? Why don't people put their questions in the chat and then Emily can read and respond to them. While you're doing that, I want to give a shout out to some of the board members of the Watershed Alliance who are watching today. Kate Meyer-Derricks and Mary McNamara, Phil DeGaetano, Emily Svensson, Dan Shapley, and then our prior president of Watershed Alliance, Simon Gruber, is on deck watching as well. So we've got a lot of wonderful support from the board and former board members watching you today, Emily.
Okay, great.
All right, do you want to just take some of these questions as they roll in?
Yeah, Ryan, I see your hand is raised, so I'll call on you in a second, but let me start with the Q&A and then I'll move to the chat. So Doreen asked if the presentation will be posted on our website. Yes, I can post this presentation on the website. I'm also recording this for better or for worse. And so we'll also be posting it up as a video. So if people missed the webinar, they can watch it afterwards. So, okay, and then I have another question. How does someone get involved with their local watershed group, from Sarah Moss? Great question. So there are a variety of different groups all across the region, and there is a listing of those groups on the Hudson River Watershed Alliance's website. And so I'm working on updating that now, like this week, maybe later today. But you can go on our website and scroll through and see all of the different watershed groups and see if there's one locally. And if there's not, and you're interested in starting something, please get in touch and I'd be happy to talk to you. Okay.
I'm going to jump in for a second. I forgot to mention Jan Blair, also board member. So.
Kevin asked, what are plans for future months meetings? Great question. So we have this breakfast lecture series every second Thursday of the month. As Russell said, we usually have that sort of the academic year timeframe. We're planning to continue that, and we'll do it as a webinar if we can't meet in person. So you can mark your calendars for the second Thursday of May and June. We'll have those meetings. Seems likely they will be online, but we will have them nonetheless.
Well, let me jump in too and say that that as many of you know, when we're at the breakfast at the diner, I often ask people, are you working on something that's interesting, that has some sort of technical grit to it, that would be a wonderful presentation? Please talk to me. So the way this has worked for all these years is that I sort of arm twist people whose great lectures I've heard, or who I just know are working on interesting things, or people volunteer and talk to me. So that's the answer to your question, Kevin, which is the future speakers are going to be dictated by people volunteering and stepping forward. I see some people's names who have signed in today who I would love to have presenting here, and I will not do I will not call out names, but I think many of you know who you are. That's how it's worked. And if you have a technical topic, please let us know.
Great. Okay. I've got a question. I think it's a comment from Mary McNamara that says, can you please discuss lessons learned about 9-element plans and working with watershed groups? And there's so much to say on this topic, but I think I'll just say that it's so important, particularly with the watershed groups. They have so much local knowledge and they have such expertise, really understanding, being the eyes and the ears of their particular water body and watershed. And it's so important to be listening to them, to listening to their understanding of the issues, responding to some of their concerns. And that goes for 9-element plans, which are technical documents. That goes for other types of projects. I think that it can be really powerful working with these local advocates and making sure their expertise is really acknowledged and considered at all levels of planning. So hopefully that answered your question, Mary. Andy Bicking says the Hudson River Watershed Alliance Network represents strong expertise that is having an impact in local communities. Thank you, Andy. Do you have plans to participate in policy discussions at the state and federal level? I would love to talk to you more about that and continue to learn about some of the opportunities. I think that in some of our communications, we're able to share the needs or the understandings of many of our local partners, and certainly we can be a conduit, hopefully, to helping out with some of these discussions. Okay, let me see. Ryan, I'm going to unmute you because your hand is raised so you can ask your question. Let's see if this works. Okay.
He's not unmuted.
Not unmuted. Oh no. Well, I keep trying to unmute you.
It may be all or nothing.
All right. Give me 1 second to try one more thing. Since this technology is new. Okay. I'm not sure I'm gonna get this to work. Ryan, can you post your question in the chat box or in the Q&A? Okay, getting back to this. Are the water bodies of smaller tributaries like Black Creek included in the watersheds of large tributaries? From Diane. Yeah, in some cases they are. I know that for Black Creek in particular, the Hudson 7 Intermunicipal Council, which is working on improving their drinking water in the Hudson River, that includes the Black Creek as part of their delineated watershed area. So that is a good example. And I know that in other areas, there are sub-watersheds of larger watersheds that are working at a smaller scale. So for example, the Tin Brook Watershed Alliance is a part of the larger Wallkill River Watershed Alliance. But each of these groups is set up a little bit differently, and so it really varies how those are treated. Let's see.
Emily, Jan Blair has asked a question in the other section under the chat section.
Yeah, okay, great. There's a lot of things to look at here. Yes, thank you, Jan. So Jan says, Westchester County has formed a climate action task force. Do you have any plans to have a roundtable in Lower Westchester? And the answer is, yes, I did until about a month ago. So we have been working in Westchester with the community resilience building workshops. So we held a workshop in the fall with Tarrytown, Sleepy Hollow, Irvington, Dobbs Ferry, and Hastings on Hudson. And then we just had one in February with Town of Ossining, Village of Ossining, Town of Newcastle, and Town of Briarcliff Manor. And so we've been working with those communities on this facilitated discussion around climate change. And I know at least one member of the Climate Action Task Force has been a part of these meetings. My plan this year until coronavirus struck was to have regional roundtables. So rather than having one roundtable that everyone has to travel for, to have one in the Lower Hudson, one in the Mid-Hudson, and one in the Upper Hudson, so that we can have more geographically connected conversations. And so I'd still really like to do that, and might need to think creatively about how we can best accomplish that. But yes, it's in the plan. Okay.
And Dan Shapley has a comment there also under the chat regarding Vermont.
Yes. Okay. Thank you, Dan. Yes, bringing up Lorraine's question. So Lorraine says you talk about intermunicipal coordination, which is great. How can we work on this for interstate cooperation for those groups whose watersheds span 2 or even 3 states? For example, us, Vermont, and New York. So Lorraine works on the Battenkill watershed in the Upper Hudson, which starts in Vermont and comes into New York State. Great question, Lorraine, and I'd love to talk to you more about that. We know there are other watersheds that also span multiple states. The Sparkill Creek watershed is in New Jersey and New York. Same with the Wallkill River watershed, has a considerable portion in New Jersey. So we have a lot of resources available from, and also the Hoosick watershed, yes, of course, in the Upper Hudson. So we have a lot of resources that are available to us through New York State, through the Hudson River Estuary Program. And so many times our funding dictates that we can only work in New York State, and yet we know that there are important components to our watershed outside of those state boundaries. So I think that that's a conversation that I'd like to have more and understand what we can do to start to build some of those relationships across our states.
I'm noting that Doreen Tignanelli made a comment earlier pointing out that wetland and watercourse protection measures are good, but they are only as good as enforcement.
Absolutely.
Fair point, and we all understand and know that, and it's one of the challenges of how to manage our water resources.
Yeah, that was planned to be a component of our agenda for the stream and buffer protection workshop. So we, for that workshop, we had all of our speakers lined up. We had a venue. We had over 75 people registered, and then we had to postpone. So I'm hopeful that we can pick that back up and have these conversations again. Thanks, Doreen.
So while we have a wonderful large pool of people on the conversation today, let me turn the question of speakers around to you guys in another way, which is if there are topics that you would like to know more about, please feed them to me and Emily, because that will provoke us to try to find a speaker on that topic. I've done that in the past. When I realized there was deep interest in a particular subject, then we dig around and try to find somebody. So we have our ear to the ground of kind of what the current issues are, but if you have suggestions or requests, let us know. I'm seeing a question about PFOA and PFAS, and we're on that. We're looking for a speaker who is able to talk about that.
And I see a couple people have asked variations on a theme of where they can find this afterwards. So I'm happy to share my slideshow presentation with anyone who's interested in it. And I'll also be posting a video of this webinar on the website for people to view if they weren't able to tune in this morning, or if there were technical issues. I see that that was an issue for at least one person.
I see a question here asking whether any of us have worked with DEP or the Bureau of Water Supply. We've had several DEP presenters just in the last couple of years. The tunnel design under the Hudson, sediment recently, and the relationship with municipalities in the Hudson Valley who buy water from New York City DEP. So I think the answer is we do interact with our DEP counterparts, and if there are particular topics, feed them in. I'm noting the suggestions relating to aquifer zoning and industrial buildings. Thanks for those suggestions. And Bill Fetter, I agree with you. It is nice to share a cup of coffee, dressed however we are, and have a conversation.
I see we have a recommendation from Dan Shapley on a speaker of John Wiley from U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service on hydro dam licensing and relicensing, and agree that that would be a great topic. Thank you, Dan. Any other questions or ideas? I probably spoke way too fast for my presentation. I apologize if I rushed through it, but I did want to make sure we had plenty of time to respond to any of your questions or comments, concerns about watershed work during COVID-19. We're here. Work continues here at the Hudson River Watershed Alliance.
Emily, you did a great job. When we meet at the diner, there's a different pacing because people raise their hands and there are questions and there's dialogue, and sometimes the eggs are being delivered and the toast is being passed around.
It's never enough coffee, yeah.
So we're learning what the right length is in a new format. And you did a wonderful job today. Thank you for being the Executive Director for the Watershed Alliance. Is there something you'd like to say about the possible speaker for next month?
Sure. And actually I just see that before I get to that, Emily Svensson mentioned that there was a portion of the presentation where it wasn't clear, and that was with the latest digest. So we have our Watershed Digest that's sent out monthly that includes a feature article on a particular topic, and this month it was innovative approaches to teaching remotely about watersheds. And so that is now, if you missed that, if you're not on our website, on our email list already, it's posted on our website under digest articles. And if you're not signed up for our digest, you will be now that you've attended this webinar. So hopefully you'll get the next one in May. So speaking of May, our May speaker is Tim Koch from the Ashokan Watershed Stream Management Program. Tim gave a wonderful talk on messy streams are healthy streams at our annual conference. And so he'll be doing that talk again for us as part of this format for anyone who missed it or for anyone who'd like more information about how a messy stream can be a healthy stream, including how to communicate with landowners and approaches to understanding what kind of messiness is most healthy for streams.
That's great. Hey, Emily, I have a logistical question that I'm going to ask in front of everybody because I don't want to miss the opportunity, but there are a lot of good suggestions here under Q&A and under the chat. When we end this call, do we lose them or do those get archived so that you can kind of go back over them? And I'm thinking, a lot of good suggestions were put in here. Should we be very quickly, or do those get saved?
Just in case they don't get saved, I will copy and paste everything so we have a record, because I agree that we've gotten some important suggestions and comments here. So yeah, good question.
I apologize for thinking out loud in front of 90 people, but I don't want to say goodbye and then lose all these good thoughts.
We're being transparent that we want to save your feedback.
Well, Sarah Powell, who may know more about this than I do, says stuff in chat should be archived on your computer. So thank you, Sarah.
Thank you, Sarah. So Dave Gilmore asked a good question. Are any water quality studies underway to monitor changes in contaminant loadings during this period of change and slowdown? And my best understanding is that it's really challenging to do water quality monitoring right now the way that we usually do, in part because many of the labs are closed, and certainly the colleges and universities and academic institutions that have been supporting this kind of monitoring are not open right now. And there's also concerns about COVID-19 being transmitted through fecal matter, which means that in our rivers and streams that we know have raw sewage, particularly CSOs, it might not be prudent to be accessing those particular areas in the way that we maybe normally would. So I think that a lot of questions are being raised right now about how we can understand water quality changes right now, how we can understand if there's a risk of transmitting COVID-19 through raw sewage and overflows. So there's some really important research questions that I think folks will be gearing up to study as soon as we can soon as we can do that. I don't know of anything currently happening, but if anyone knows anything currently happening, please let us know. I did see that the Sauk Hill Watershed community sent out an email on their list, I think yesterday, about SECI testing. So there might be some study of turbidity and in the Sauk Hill. So there might be some smaller efforts by groups during this time that are social distance appropriate, that don't involve lab analysis.
That said, any data systems that are in place and do remote sensing will be collecting data through this period. And I can think of many locations that have remote sensing, at least with limited parameter instrumentation. And any locations that have regulatory sampling, they are still obligated to be doing their regulatory sampling. So, ambient condition sampling that often happens with respect to a speedies permit, for example, those data will still be, should still be being collected. So Dave, you asked a very interesting question. I know that USGS, and some of you have seen this article, has noted that the seismic signals are really different throughout the planet when there's less throughway noise and all sorts of other noises. And by the same token, there may be, based on the data streams that I just described, some really interesting shifts that are happening during this stand down period.
Okay, and Dan has a comment, another idea for speakers: look at the Mohawk Symposium lineup and partner with Union College and the Mohawk Watershed Alliance, John Garver, to present one or more in collaboration. Symposium was canceled due to COVID-19. And Dan has posted the abstract volume for the Mohawk Watershed Symposium. That's another great idea. Thank you, Dan. The Mohawk Symposium is an excellent conference. I was really disappointed to not be able to attend this year, but for anyone who's interested in the Mohawk, John and his team were able to gather all of the abstracts at that link. And so you can still get a sense of all of the work that's going on, some of the pressing issues that's all been compiled on that link. And then another link that I will just type into the chat here, this is Emily Svensson, one of our board members, reminded me to share. That's the link to our digest archives. That's where the article on teaching during COVID-19 is up. I also have an article on the Mohawk Symposium. That was our February article. So take a look there if you haven't been signed up for our email list and want to get caught up.
When the concept for these breakfasts was being formatted back in 2007, my personal interest and need had always been to find a group of colleagues across organizations who could meet once a month and just share our work with each other. Because some of us, do a mix. I'm a consultant, for those of you who don't know. Much of my work is, fairly pedestrian, and then every once in a while I get to do something that really has sort of crossover value. And many of us find ourselves in that same situation. We're either researchers or we're regulators or we're advocates or whatever we are, but some of the time we're working with really interesting material that is more than just the day job and is worth sharing. And my hope had been that these watershed breakfasts would be that. So while we've been tossing out topics here of sort of high importance and great speakers, I want to talk anybody off the ledge who might be saying, oh, well, I'm not that fancy. Or that, that deep a scholar or something like that. I think many of you whose names I see enrolled today are people who do interesting work from time to time that is worthy of sharing amidst maybe the humdrum of other parts of the job. And I can think of many of you who I see on this list. So if there's just a particular project or a topic that has carryover value, please talk to us. Peter Smith and others have come in and said, I have an idea, I've got a germ of a planning concept, let's talk about it. That's what these breakfasts can be.
All right, well, it's 9:30.
Yeah. Emily, sign us off.
Okay. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us this morning as we are learning this technology and adapting our work to the new normal. And we hope to see you all again next month. So have a good day.